If you guys are on Slack and you want to follow along, you can download the presentation. So how many of you guys are familiar with Node.js? Everyone, perfect. Okay, so this is the last chapter on Eloquent JavaScript. How many of you guys are excited as bastards that we're done with JavaScript? Okay. So again, this is not in-depth training for Node. It's more of a, let me expose you to what it is and kind of how it works. If you guys want Node training, that would be a separate Wednesday thing.
Oh,
So, oh, here comes one more person. Cool. Okay, so what is Node? Node is an open source server environment, right? It's free. You don't have to pay for it. It runs on various platforms, so Windows, Linux, Unix, and so on. And it uses JavaScript on the server. Okay? Does that make any sense? Perfect.
Does it compile?
I'm sorry? It's an environment. So Node is an environment. So use JavaScript with Node. And I'll explain right now. So Node was initially conceived for the purpose of making asynchronous programming easy and convenient, right? So JavaScript lends itself well to a system like Node. It's one of the few programming languages that does not have a built-in way to do in and output, right? So JavaScript could fit into Node's rather eccentric approach to in and output without ending up with two different ways to do it, right? So there's only one way. So how many of you guys have worked with PHP or ASP? Okay, cool. So a common task for a web server can be to open a file on the server and return the content to the client, right? So here. So here's how PHP or ASP handles it, right? So they send the task to the computer's file system. It waits while the file system opens and reads the file, and then returns the content to the client, and it's ready to handle the next request, right? And you guys can see the finally perfect. Okay, cool. Before I wasn't sure if you guys can see my cursor, right? Okay, now here's how Node handles it. It sends the task to the computer's file system, and it's ready to handle the next request, right? When the file system has opened and read the file, the server returns the content to the client once it's done, right? It seems more efficient, right? Perfect. Now again, remember I say right because I want to see you guys do this or do this. Cool, so Node.js eliminates the waiting and simply continues on to the next request. It runs single-threaded, non-blocking, asynchronously programming, which is very memory efficient. Okay? Thanks, Spencer. So what can it do? Okay? Node can generate dynamic page content. It can create, open, read, write, delete, and close files on the server. It can collect form data, add, delete, modify data. It's pretty much what a backend language can do, right? So are we getting the picture of Node?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. So what is a Node.js file? Node.js files contain tasks that we executed on certain events. Okay, a typical event is someone trying to access a form on the server. Node.js files must be initiated on the server before having any effect. And the files for a Node.js application have the extension of .js. Right? It's very familiar. You guys have worked with JavaScript before. It should feel very familiar. So the Node command. When Node.js is installed on the system, it provides a program called Node, which is used to run JavaScript files. Say you have a file called hello.js containing this code. So we've seen this before, right? It's a binding called message, and it's assigned a string that says hello world. And then we're using, console.log, and we're logging to the console the message, right? We've all seen this before.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, you can then run Node from the command line like this to execute the program, right? So Node, and then the name of the file, and it'll execute it. And you can see that in your terminal, right? Pretty straightforward, right?
So it just echoes your
Whatever
console to the terminal?
Yeah, because you're using console.log. So you know how in the browser, and I'll get to the differences, but you know how in the browser, when you do console.log, it'll show in your browser console?
Yeah.
Well, here is in the terminal.
So I mean, instead of going to a browser console,
Right.
It's echoing to
In
the
the
terminal.
terminal, yep.
Or not echoing, it's output.
Cool. And again, if I say right, I'm looking at you guys. That's why I said right. Nobody's doing, okay. If you run Node without giving it a file, it provides you with a prompt at which you can type JavaScript code and immediately see the results, right? So it's pretty interactive. So you type in Node, and then you get this little thing right here, you can start typing, right?
It's kind of like IRB with Ruby.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So 1 + 1, 2, and so on, and you can play around with it, right? Cool. So you might have noticed right here where this fancy pointer is pointing to, it says process, right? So the process binding, just like the console binding, is available globally in Node. It provides various ways to inspect and manipulate the current program. The exit method ends the process and can be given an exit status code. So let me see, are we using exit? Yep, right here, exit method. And it can be given an exit status code, which tells the program that started Node, in this case, a command line show, whether the program completed successfully with code 0 or encountered error, any other code. Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So Node versus the browser. So like I said, the console.log method in Node does something similar to what it does in the browser. It prints out a piece of text. But in Node, the text will go to the process's standard output stream rather than to the browser's JavaScript console, right? Right? Okay, perfect. When running Node from the command line, that means you see the log values in your terminal. Okay? Very cool. So a lot of you guys have worked with React, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You turn on your React application, you see a bunch of errors, right? Now I'm assuming all of you guys get errors. So you should probably say, thank you, Vess. Great. I never get errors. Okay, so all these standard JavaScript global bindings, such as array, math, and JSON, they're all present in Node's environment. Browser-related functionality, such as document or prompt, does not. Okay, so we understand that, right? Since we don't have the browser environment, those variables are not present in Node, and it applies in the browser as well. If you're looking for something that's in Node, you won't find it in your browser, right? Okay. I said too many words and I didn't see any movement. Maybe I stopped looking at you guys and just keep going.
So how do you output stuff? How do you use Node with stuff in the browser?
What do you mean?
Well, none of the browser elements are present in Node.
So when you do something like React, for example, right? You compile everything for production and you put it on your server. So that's a bit different because you're serving it on the browser now.
Okay.
But with Node, you're working on the server itself, right? Thank you for the heads up. Appreciate it. So beyond the bindings mentioned, such as console and process, Node puts few additional bindings in the global scope. If you want to access built-in functionality, you have to ask the module system for it, okay? Here's where it becomes wonderful. So the common JS module system is based on the require function. How many of you guys have seen the require function before? Perfect. This system is built into Node and is used to load anything from built-in modules to downloaded packages to files that are part of your own program. And we have an example coming up. So when require is called, Node has to resolve the given string to an actual file that it can load. When a string that does not look like a relative or absolute path is given to require, it is assumed to refer to either a built-in module or a module installed in a Node modules directory, right? So here's your example. We have a binding called lib, and we're using require, and we're passing it a string, right? So it's first trying to see, hey, is this a absolute or relative path? If it's not, it's gonna assume that it's a package, right?
Why is it saying var instead of lib?
Personal preference. Whoever wrote that example, it wasn't me. They just decided I'm gonna use var right here. I'm gonna throw Scott off, so, yeah.
It should actually be constant.
Yeah, so,
Maybe it's cool.
I don't know, maybe he was cold and said, I don't want const, I want var. And then we have a function, right? A binding named foo. I never like saying that word, foo. And then we're using lib.
Var is function scope and let is block scope. I looked that up.
Oh, were you asking what the difference is?
No,
No.
he's saying.
No, he was.
Oh, okay.
I was just curious because you alluded
Oh,
to
no,
that
no,
they
no,
were
no,
the
no, no.
same, and I was like,
No, I did not say that there's a, we talked about this, guys. Don't tell me you forgot. Because that's worse than not nodding at all. That means we wasted weeks over here. Okay, I'm gonna assume he's just joking. We covered this. Actually, we know the difference, right?
Right.
Yes.
I don't believe you one bit, man.
No.
Okay, it's fine. We'll keep going. We'll have a talk later. Okay, cool. So NPM, it's an online repository of JavaScript modules, many of which are specifically written for Node. When you install Node on your computer, you also get the npm command, which you can use to interact with this repository. Okay, how many of you guys have worked with different package managers before? Perfect. Any of you guys have some examples? Just throw them out there.
PHP uses Composer.
Yeah. One person, that's fine. That's fine. Homebrew. Homebrew? Okay, cool.
Is it Yarn one?
Yarn? Yeah. That's. Vass, what about for C#?
NuGet.
NuGet?
NuGet. And then it'll be interesting to see
Oh, no, we started.
GitHub is doing their thing too.
GitHub?
Yeah, GitHub's got a thing where it's in beta right now.
Uh-huh.
But it's basically like another one where you can include your package for your project, as opposed to like all of the packages available for npm or whatever, right? Like it doesn't go to one giant host of packages. It's like a host for your project. So you don't have to worry about like if the thing where you're getting your package from goes down, right? Like everybody's goes down.
Right.
This is like a personal include that it's in
okay.
beta right now, but it seems pretty cool. So
That's interesting.
Python has pip as well.
That's what?
Pip.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Very cool. Okay.
So isn't like Firebase a type of package manager? No, I'm not talking like on the server side. I'm talking like on the client side when you're working on your local directory Firebase project.
I don't think so.
No?
No.
Okay.
But in this case, npm, you can see here from this example, again, that fancy little pointer up here. We'll just go all around so you guys are paying attention. Okay. And like cats, you can do this. Okay, so npm, we pass it in the install command, and we tell it what we want to install, right? That's pretty straightforward, right? It can't be any simpler than that, unless it starts like reading your mind. And then here it's throwing out a warning that it didn't find a package.json file, right? And we'll talk about what that is. And then it'll give you all of this, right? It added one package, and super fast time right here. Okay.
Actually, there's a change to that now. Now it actually will let you know vulnerabilities, like
Yeah.
whether you have just like warnings or errors based on the packages you're installing.
I usually see Lodash not having their things together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Node.JS is the worst.
Yeah.
Like, man.
Any of you guys
Stop
getting
using
those notifications from GitHub? Yeah, they're annoying. They're useful,
Oh.
but they're annoying. Okay, so then they're doing Node. They want to, test it out, and you can see that they're already able to use the package that they installed, right? Very cool. So package files. When you run npm install without naming the package to install, npm will install the dependencies listed in your package.json file. Okay? When you install a specific package that is not already listed as a dependency, npm will add it to package.json. Okay? Have you guys, it's not in the context of this talk, but you're able to save them as dependencies or as for development, right? Vas?
Node by default gets the latest package, I assume.
You can set it.
You
to-
can probably request it, but
Yeah.
by default it just gets the latest.
It should,
right?
yeah. One more person. Anyways, so this is what the package.json file looks like. You can see it has options like setting the author, the name. The part I want you guys to look at is where it says dependencies. This is where all your packages are being added, right? If you're adding packages just for development, you have something like dev dependencies, which is a different list, right? Any questions about package.json?
I read a while back, and I've forgotten and can't Google it. I'm just wondering if anybody here knows the caret in front of the version types. I understand
This right here?
Yeah, indicates whether or not they'll update based on major releases or however, whether or not have breaking changes. There's caret, tilde, and nothing, I guess, for the options. I don't know if anybody here knows the difference, but
Yeah, I don't know.
I think the caret indicates it will update with minor releases,
Mhm.
and maybe the tilde will. I don't think anything updates with breaking changes. sure.
Yeah, all I know is that you can set it. So if anyone
There's a
knows,
unique difference between the tilde and the caret, but I think they both are for minor.
Oh, really?
And then if you don't put any of them, it will only put that version in.
cool.
But I don't remember exactly the difference between the two.
Yeah, if you can find it, you can put it on Slack.
Yeah.
That'd be useful.
Yeah, I tried to Google it once after I realized I'd forgotten what I read.
Yeah, it's one of those things that if it works, I'm cool. Until it doesn't, I'll look it up and I'll learn it. So far, it hasn't broken anything. So, any other questions about package.json? No? We're all experts on it now?
Says, NPM uses the tilde and caret to designate which patch and minor versions to use respectively. So yeah, you are right. It's
Cool.
whether or not you use the minor, update or not.
Which one is that?
Tilde or caret, so tilde will do, patch versions, so if it's like
Oh,
a
okay.
patch, and then, caret means that it uses the minor version.
You want to say that a bit louder so we can hear?
Well, okay, so if you put
It's a
a
secret.
tilde, it means whatever version you specify or above. So if you do tilde 1, it would do 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever.
Mhm.
And then, the caret means to install that version or the latest minor or patch. So in other words, the tilde would only be a full release version, and the, caret means, if there's a patch or some minor update, will also get that, like 1.02 or 1.03, and then the tilde is 1 or 2 or 3.
Okay, cool.
So saith Google.
So say we all.
I think you already knew this. You secretly use JavaScript at
That's
work.
what it
So. So, file system module. One of the most commonly used built-in modules in Node is the FS module, which stands for file system, right? It exports functions for working with files and directories. Okay, does that make sense?
See,
Very cool. Okay, common uses for the file system module. Read files, create files, update files, delete files, rename files, right? I wasn't sure if that was necessary, but it's in there. So, just in case, right?
Crudder.
Crutter? Crutter? Yeah, I should have put it in order, right? Man. So here's an example. We have a binding, it's a constant. For those of you guys that were concerned earlier, we called it FS, for file system, and we're requiring it, right? And then we're using it, okay? So what are we doing here? We're using the read file method of FS, the package right here, and we're giving it a path, right? What kind of file is this? So we all know what text files are, perfect. Okay, and we're passing it a anonymous function, right? I can only assume this is error and then whatever data, right? Cool, wonderful naming right here, okay? So if there's an error, it'll console.error, right? It'll return what, like red text in the console or something special in the terminal, okay? And then if it's successful, it'll return the data, right?
Is that something built into read file then? That it returns those two in that order?
What do you mean? Like,
Yes.
right here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I thought you meant like right here, like, no.
No, I meant like you would just automatically know
Yeah.
those two pieces.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you'll see what these things do. You guys can fight it. Don't look at the pizza. Now you guys are gonna be, he needs to finish.
Resist.
Yeah. We're almost done, guys. We're almost done. So, someone had a question?
I said no more questions.
No more questions? Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Good tactic. So, HTTP module. Another central module is called HTTP. It provides functionality for running HTTP servers and making HTTP requests.
That's all I have, man.
Right? So, we have an example on the next slide, and it's how to start a very basic HTTP server, right? It's nothing complex. It has like one purpose. Okay? Someone want to tell me what's going on in that first slide? Not all of you guys. It's just one. Come on.
It's creating an object, right?
No, the brackets are supposed to be on the other
You
side.
guys are too loud.
Alright.
It's one person. Come on. Nobody? Ow, come on, save us.
Teacher, help us.
Teacher, help us.
Basically, setting
the
the
brackets on this side.
So it's
the recurring
Importing
value
the
to the
create
create
server.
server.
so it's pulling this specific variable from here,
Variable from-
right? Yeah.
Okay.
So we're gonna say server. We're gonna use this function that we're pulling from here.
Would you say it's cloning it?
It's pulling it. So
So there's
this
a-
package right here has a binding called
Okay.
create server.
And putting it in brackets like that pulls it out?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
Yes.
interesting.
What's the name of
Instead
that?
just doing
We covered
requires
Destructing?
HTTP slash.
Destructing, is that it? Am I wrong?
Destructoring? I don't know. We covered it.
I
There's
could be
way
wrong.
too many people in here for us
I
not to
wasn't
remember.
here for the early chapters, so.
That's a good excuse.
Or de-
I'm gonna piggyback.
Well, the
on
nice
that
thing
one.
is that we know what it does. So let's go with that. Okay? We don't have our buddy Google to ask right now. So we're using this function, right? Create server, and we're passing it two parameters. It has two parameters, request and response, right? Let's see. So the function passes argument to create server is called every time a client connects to the server. Okay? The request and response bindings are objects representing the incoming and outgoing data. Can you guys guess which one's the incoming?
Request.
Which one's the outgoing?
Request is incoming,
Response.
response is outgoing.
Okay. So the first contains information about the requests, such as its URL property, and which tells us what URL the request was made from, right? So when you open that page in your browser, it sends a request to your computer. This causes the server function to run and sends back a response, which you can send. You can then see in the browser, right? Thank you, Vess, for that heads up. So the call to server.listen causes the server to start waiting for the connections on port 8000. Okay, so this is right here. So that's what makes your server start listening. Okay. So very straightforward, right? Wonderful, perfect. Okay. So again, this is not Node training, it's more exposing you to it, but do you guys have any questions about anything in here? I'm assuming all of you are gonna go home, you're gonna play with Node, and you're gonna build applications,
Yes.
except that C# guy in the back. Okay, we'll keep on talking about Blazor. So streams. We have seen two instances of writable streams in the HTTP example, right? Namely the response object that the server could write to and the request object that was returned from the request. Okay? Writable streams are a widely used concept in Node. Such objects have a write method that can be passed a string or a buffer object to write something to the string. Their end method closes the stream and optionally takes a value to write to the stream before closing. Okay? So if we go back to that example, you can see that it has an end method, right? What do you think that does?
Closing the file?
Closes the stream, right?
Stream, yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Both of these methods can also be given a callback as an additional argument, which they will call when the writing and closing has finished. Okay. We also have readable streams. Readable streams are a little more involved. Both the request binding that was passed to the HTTP server's callback and the response binding passed to the HTTP client's callback are readable streams. Okay, a server reads requests and then writes responses, whereas a client first writes a request and then reads a response. Okay. So the next one, readable streams have, and we'll go back to the example, have data and end events. The first is fired every time data comes in, and the second is called whenever the stream is at its end. So all of you guys should be familiar with add event handler on the browser. Okay, you'll see that we have, and we'll go over it real quick. But you guys see this dot on, this on method? Pretty much the same thing. Okay.
Is data, you said that's fired whenever data comes in. If it comes in as a stream, does that just mean it fires when it begins, or every time?
It fires
comes in
whenever
chunks
this
of
event
data?
has been triggered.
Well, right, but what I'm saying is, does it fire at when the data, because if it comes in as a stream, that doesn't, that doesn't necessarily mean one,
So-
block of data.
Right, so what it's saying is the first is fired every time data comes in, right?
Every time. So if it's a huge stream of data that comes in multiple chunks, then that would fire each time you get a
So we'll
chunk.
see chunks too, because it does
Okay.
use a binding called chunks.
Okay.
And the second is called whenever the stream is at its end. This model is most suited for streaming data that can be immediately processed, even when the whole document isn't available yet, right? We're almost there. Objects that emit events in Node have a method called on. that is similar to the add event listener method in the browser. You give it an event name and then a function, and it will register that function to be called whenever the event occurs, right? So now the example. And this is what I was talking about, chunk, fastly, right here.
Why'd you just call me a chunk?
What? Let's not go there. We don't want to have this talk on video. So again, we have create server that we're pulling from this package right here, right? The HTTP package that we're requiring. And then we're using it here. We have request and response. We learned about these two. And then we're using response dot the method called writehead. You pass it in the status code, and then these headers, right? But here, this is the part that I want you guys to look at. Request.on. So when data comes in, you pass in this this function. We're going to assume that it's passing this binding to it, right? Called chunk, and we're using it here. Response.write. What do you think it's doing here?
Converting it to an uppercase string, whatever the data is.
Okay. So here. So this code creates a server that reads request bodies and streams them back to the client as an all uppercase text, right? The chunk value passed to the data handler will be a binary buffer. We can convert this to a string by decoding it as a UTF -8 encoded characters with this toString method. So we can see that we're using toString right here, right? So we can convert it, and now we're doing it uppercase like you said, okay? And then what about this one? The end event. What do you think happens?
And it's firing that anonymous method whenever the end event is triggered.
Yeah, and what do you think is going to happen when it gets fired?
Streams.
Perfect. Okay, what port is it listening on?
8,000.
Perfect. So, we could have just done the summary, and you guys would have learned the same thing. So, summary. All the wonderful things you guys just learned, or just covered again. So, Node is a nice small system that lets us run JavaScript in a non-browser context. It was originally designed for network tasks to play the role of a node in the network, but it lends itself to all kinds of scripting tasks. And if writing JavaScript is something you enjoy like Vast, automating tasks in Node works very well, okay? NPM provides packages for everything you can think of, and it allows you to fetch and install those packages with the NPM program, okay? All of you guys are familiar with NPM now. Node comes with a number of built-in modules, including the FS. Do you guys remember what FS stands for?
File system.
File system. Thank you so much, Vest. Let's see. Module for working with the file system. And the HTTP module for running HTTP servers and making HTTP requests. And lastly, we're almost there. That pizza is still warm. All input and output in Node, make sure you grab some Vest. Node is done asynchronously, unless you explicitly use a synchronous variant of a function. That's another thing. A lot of these methods are asynchronous, but you do have the option, if you want for some reason to make it synchronously, you usually have an alternate function to use, okay? And I think we have an example here, yeah, such as read file sync, right? That makes it synchronous. So when calling such asynchronous functions, you provide callback functions, and Node will call them with an error value, and if available, a result when it is ready, okay? Any questions?
So if you were to do it synchronously, it wouldn't move on, it would just keep doing
Right,
it?
so the way, yeah, perfect. Now again, I don't know why you would do that, but
Yeah.
there must be a use case, so.
I think mainly it's if you're like doing scripting, sometimes you wanna wait for files to be read, or you wanna, and you just wanna, because you're gonna process it, you're
Yeah.
trying to go through,
Yeah,
so.
there you go. Perfect. Any questions?
Yeah.
Yay! Wow! Well, thank you guys. Wonderful. So, now that we're done, you guys can get pizza. If you guys want to stick around, you can network, ask questions. At 5 o'clock, we have the other meetup doing their thing, so you guys are more than welcome to join. So.
Hang out, if you guys like networking, there's going to be some good, cool people talking tech, so hang out and talk.
Perfect. And then also, please don't forget Hack Day. That's next Saturday. It's going to be a big event. Even if you guys feel like you can't contribute anything to a
If you're on
team,
a team,
yeah, you can contribute. Okay, opinions, manage the project, prioritize, help with cleaning code up, documentation, anything. You guys can contribute. It's not that difficult. It's only 4 hours, and you guys can build something. You're getting skeleton code, so you can build on top of it. Okay. How many of you guys are actually going to Hack Day? How many of you guys are lying? Okay, perfect, okay. Make sure if you can make it, right? Especially if you don't have a job in the industry yet, help yourself, right? I can't just give you a job and say, hey, here it goes.
Right, it's something you throw in your portfolio.
Yeah, I can only offer you guys opportunities, and that's an opportunity, right? You might meet your next employer there. So please, okay? Any questions about Hack Day, let me know, either in person or on Slack, or ask Jen, David, or anyone else on the team, okay? Perfect, thank you guys.